Hi there, and welcome to Inside the Woniverse, a podcast brought to you from the corner of Fringe and Maine. I'm your host, Colette Barron-Reed. Joining us today is my very good friend, Kristen Hahn, who has so generously agreed to be here, and boy, is she busy. Kristen is the president of Hahnscape Entertainment and one of the most influential film and TV producers in the world. She has a robust body of work, including the most amazing films like The Departed, The Time Traveler's Wife, oh my God, I saw that 10 times, Cake and Stargirl, and television series like Netflix's Dumplin', I cried, and Apple TV's award-winning big hit, The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston. Now, Kristen and Jennifer are also producing partners and co-own the company Echo Films. Kristen is the author of an extraordinary book, which is how I met her, called In Search of Grace, a religious outsider's journey across America's landscape of faith. And for the last decade, her book has served as a crucial part of the ethics course curriculum at Indiana University. This year, Kristen was invited to be the polling chair at the Kelley Business School at Indiana University, teaching leadership styles in the workplace. With her unique style of storytelling, Kristen has an incredible way of being involved in meaningful, authentic, and relevant projects, all the while truly influencing a global audience. We're so thrilled to welcome you on the podcast, Kristen. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, it's a dream. I love you so much. And I love talking about creativity with you through all the years as writers, supporting each other and sharing tips or just encouragement along the way. So it's exciting.
I'm excited to have you here. And, you have such a great story. And, I want to go right to the beginning with little you. So you were born in Omaha, Nebraska, raised there and in New Mexico. What was your upbringing like?
I am a child of divorce, as they say. And so I learned at a very young age. I was very resourceful at a very young age and pretty independent. But I had a very strong mom. I have a couple, of dads. And my mom and I moved to New Mexico when I was 8. And she was a working mom and I was a latchkey kid. So I, spent a lot of time alone, took care of myself a lot. I look back at those days and realized how it prepared me for the real world. Right. I was not afraid to be alone, live alone, move, try new things because I was used to it. So I think I've learned, some things we look at as deficiencies or tragedies actually become our greatest strength. And I also had a grandfather who was genuinely my best friend. And he lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, near us. And he was the one who taught me the value of driving. I learned how to drive when I was like 13. And I got a car when I was 14. And he taught me, he taught me the beauty of getting in a car and just driving. And he also taught me not to be afraid of strangers, interestingly. So we did a lot of traveling together. He and I would take road trips a lot. And he planted the seed that I can just decide to go somewhere and just go by myself and not to be careful, be cautious, but be aware, but not to be afraid of strangers, which really just shaped my whole future, basically.
I wonder, now that you've said that, you've been a storyteller your whole life. And I wonder now, hearing this, because I never knew this about you, that your grandfather's influence on you, and especially around not being afraid of strangers, enabled you to be open to hear the stories of other people's lives. Because when we're super suspicious and divisive with other people, we don't get to know anybody else. We don't hear the stories. We don't know the stories, so you were open. Do you think that was part of how come you became such a storyteller?
I think without a doubt. Also, he was one of the greatest storytellers. So I come from storytelling DNA, and I'm trying to, make good on that. I definitely, the first project I ever did was a documentary. So I went to film school. I would say my true film school, life school came from the first project I decided to do myself. in my mid-20s, I just graduated from film school, a couple of years of trying to figure it out, being an assistant and realizing I've got to go make something myself. So a friend and I hit the road, and we were on the American road in a car for almost a year, traveling around, interviewing people. And to be honest, it doesn't even matter what you interview people about. Just getting people talking, and like you're doing, like you do, tell their story. You start to, if you're open to hearing people's stories, as you said, which I had learned from my grandpa, he would start a conversation with anybody he was sitting next to. By the way, his favorite place to land was at a bar. So we sat at bars a lot on stools and met a lot of strangers, and he would get them talking, and he just wanted to know their story. So probably no surprise, the first project I did was a documentary where my friend and I would just ask strangers if we could interview them. And some were well-known people, and some were strangers we met in diners or gas stations. And we made a time capsule documentary, and we ended up writing a book about America at the turn of the century, and where are we at with the American experiment, right? Does the American dream, what does that mean to people, really? What does the American hero mean to people? And where are we at with the realization of these ideals that this country is, technically founded on? Yes, we had a topic, but honestly, we just got people talking about their story. And I was amazed by how willing people are to tell their story, and how much we need to tell our story. We need it. We need someone to witness who we are. I just flashed on a guy who ran a grain truck. We met in a diner, and we just sat next to him, and I said, he was a gruff guy. He was intimidating, but I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to ask him if we can interview him. And so I got up the courage to ask him, and he actually said yes. And he had the most incredible life story. He lived in a tiny town. You would have thought he had very little to tell us, and he had so much. So I fell in love with other people's stories, which is really what my mission is connected to, is storytelling that can help us understand ourselves and help us heal.
That's one of the reasons why I love your work so much. And as I've gotten to know you over the years, your commitment to storytelling, because we need it. It's like medicine. Storytelling is medicine. And people don't even realize how much they get influenced by the stories that they see on television and film, etc. And why I've always loved your commitment to telling the stories that mean something. So let's dial back again and talk about your spiritual awakening, or any awareness of your intuition at a young age. I know you're very woo, which is why I invited you.
I'm woo-woke, yes.
You're woo-woo like me. So did you have any experience growing up? I mean, maybe you're hanging out with your grandfather. I don't know. How would it come when you started realizing that there was another world that you could tap into too?
Well, I think because I was an only child, I ended up, my imagination was really stirred. Because when you don't have another person to play with or talk to, you're left with your own imagination. I think that's where it started. I would also credit New Mexico as a place.
Yeah.
I think the place where we grow, where we live, is so significant. And that, for me, there was just an innate mysticism to New Mexico where I lived that I didn't understand until I left, right? And I looked back and realized, wow, I grew up almost feeling like everything was alive around me, like really having a sense that there's a mystery, and I was very curious. I loved going up into the mountains, into the desert, and just like letting my imagination run wild. So that is where it began. And I'd say I've also been so lucky. I've been so lucky to meet people who have opened my mind and my eyes, my heart to different things. And I just flashed on a friend of mine, Cal Peacock, who's probably about 10 years older than I am. And when I was 21, she sent me on my first vision quest, which was, and she facilitated it. So 3 days out in the New Mexican desert, and with just water. And that was, I've always had a reverence for nature, a little bit of a healthy fear. I know nature can, thrash us if she chooses. But the pull has always been really strong. And the spiritual experiences I've had have always been when I'm surrounded by nature. And that was a profound experience because I had to rely on myself, my intuition in a very deep kind of survivalistic way and face all my fears. And the final fear I had to face was after 3 days of being, out there by myself with a tarp and water, it was time to come back. And
right.
I started to, and I was a little delirious, and I started to head back, and I got lost, and I had no idea where I was.
Oh, wow.
I was so turned around, and I didn't really have much energy, but I climbed the tallest mountain I could find so that I could get a perspective. And I got to the top of the mountain, and all I saw was unending desert in all directions. And I started to panic, as anyone would. Like, this is it. I'm going to be now the character in a movie. It's like Wild gone wrong. And I'm going to be found dead on this mountaintop. And I started to really panic. And I had to get back to that, like, okay, just breathe. Just breathe. Remember, you're not alone. You're not by yourself. There is something here that can help you and tell you. And I really had to just trust. And I remember just closing my eyes. It's that I'm going to die moment. I'm closing my eyes. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to listen. And I was near a giant tree, and I heard a voice, as if it were my own, that said, "Follow the Pinecone Trail." And I opened my eyes and I looked around. Where is the Pinecone Trail? And I saw, not too far, pine cones that literally zigzagged down this mountain in this particular direction. And I was like, I wonder, is that the Pinecone Trail? I followed the Pinecone Trail. It's like a fairy tale. And literally got back to civilization. And I just fell onto my knees and cried I was so humbled by, I swear to this day, I'm sure the tree told me, follow the Pinecone Trail. I don't think it was me. I think it was literally that mother tree was like, here's how you're going to get home. It's not your time to die.
Oh, it's so incredible, that story. When you think about New Mexico, I've had similar experiences, not with getting lost there, but that sense that the trees spoke. I mean, I always was an animist. I always believed in the spirit, the actual essential consciousness of nature, and that I could communicate with it ever since I was a really small child. But as an adult, I really felt it in New Mexico. Like, I feel like that place is like the veil is so thin there, and that you can communicate with nature, and just some incredible, incredible experiences. That is a true spiritual awakening, what you're talking about.
Yeah, reliance on nature, and also friends, friends taking you through experiences. Yeah.
And when we have to rely, it's that point where we have to surrender and trust. That's a perfect example of that. So surrendering and trusting, let's imagine that you have a dream, right? And your dream is all about a career in Hollywood. Or was that your dream? Or did you just stumble into it? How did you get there? Because, when you think of where you began and where you are now, it's a big, big, big cavernous.
It's a big leap, no question about it. And I knew I wanted to be a storyteller, right? So I remember thinking it when I was 15. Like, I remember, maybe I had it before that, but I remember being 15 and thinking, okay, I want to be a storyteller. And I didn't know the names of the jobs. So to this day, I try and just call myself a storyteller rather than saying, oh, I'm a screenwriter, I'm a producer, I write books. Like, I'm a storyteller. And what I was tapped into at 15 was, like everybody else these days, watching things that moved me. So I would watch movies with my mom or by myself. I watched a lot of TV as a latchkey kid. And I could get lost in these worlds. They would take me places I'd never been before, these stories. My mom and I would cry together. And there was such a sense of catharsis and journeying and self-understanding that came from, and dreaming that came from these stories that I saw. I was like, I want to do that for people. I want to be a part of that. That's all I knew. And I packed my car, my little Nissan, and drove to Los Angeles when I was 19, against the better judgment of everybody that I knew, my parents included. And I had the name of one guy. So I didn't know this person. I literally knew his name.
Okay.
And I cold called this poor guy for 30 days. I called him every day and left a message with his assistant. Now I understand this dynamic. I get these calls now. I try to be really patient and loving about it all, because I was that kid once on the other end going like, "Hi, I'm new to town. I don't know a single soul. Thank you for taking my call." Because he finally answered the phone after 30 days and said, "Who are you and why do you keep calling me?" And I said, "I'm desperate for a job, and I would be so grateful if I could come meet you." And he said with a giant sigh, "Okay, fine. Come to my office. I'll meet you for 5 minutes." He said, "If you're not a crazy person, I'll maybe help you get one interview. And then you need to stop calling me." And I said, "Great." So we met literally in his hallway. I didn't present crazy, I guess, because he got me an interview. And that interview was with a writer, a comedy writer and producer. And he hired me, thankfully. And that really completely changed my life, like a stranger, just helped me out. And that relationship with that writer, he really became my mentor. And we had a really cool relationship. He was actually going through a divorce at the time, which is, I think, why I got the job, because I went in for the interview. He was a comedy writer, but he was literally the least funny, most depressed person I'd ever met. And I was like, so confused. I thought he'd be hilarious, right? I'm 19. Right. I'm meeting like one of the big comedy writers in town. He's literally the least funny person I've ever met. So I sit there and I try and figure out what's going on, and I'm like trying to carry the conversation. He's so depressed he can barely speak. And I finally said,
sorry for laughing.
I know. I finally got
funny.
out of him that he was going through a divorce after 40 years of being married. So I said, oh. So me being a wise-ass 19-year-old who did know a lot at 19, I feel like I knew more then than I do now in some ways, I counseled him on divorce and promised him he was going to be okay. I think I talked to him about the grief process and how it gets better, because I had gone through, at that point, 4 divorces with my parents.
Wow.
My parents were very, very big on that experience in my younger years. So I was an expert at 19, and he looked at me at the end of this interview of me counseling him as this young 19-year-old and said, "I'm going to hire you. You've got the job." And we would start the morning every morning with coffee, talking for 20, 30 minutes, which basically was a therapy session. And the end of that good story is I worked for him for 3.5 years. And as I was transitioning out of that job, he and his wife got back together.
Aw, that's so nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice ending to a difficult story. I love that. It is true too, when you go in and you get a job in Hollywood and you think that the comedian's going to be the most hysterical person on the planet. He turns out to be the most depressed person that you've ever met. I mean, again, it goes back to the human story, right?
Yeah.
We're all storytellers, and that is what you wanted. And even that beginning job is a perfect example of how you manifested that. And I always tell people, just hold space for, I want to be a storyteller. I know that is my purpose. And the how is not in your hands. The how, like it just falls in your lap, because it's not yours to figure out how is it going to happen. It's yours to show up for it. Like you said, everybody said, don't go to Hollywood, but you just knew, I'm going to go there. And how lucky is that? Now, is that how you got on Cheers? Is that when
that
were you
was
on
Cheers? Yeah, that was
Cheers.
a writer on Cheers. And I just want to add to that, because I think that's beautiful what you said, holding space for things, but also not being so literal. We're very literal.
Right, no literal.
We're very literal as humans. As I get older, I really notice that with people, myself included. We get an idea of something, and we're very visual, and our imaginations are typically quite good. So we start to imagine the exactness of it. And I think what I was able to do at a young age, and that's why I continue to keep the definition of myself very broad, because I want a broad umbrella within which to express myself as a storyteller. So that might mean going to teach at Indiana University for a week as a storyteller. I want to keep a really broad definition for my own mental space, as much as other people's definition of me, because the less literal we are, the more amazing ways the universe can reveal things to us, and we're able to see it.
100% in agreement with you, because it really is the essence. And I know too, I always get into a little trouble when I think it has to be a certain way, like something has to show up this exact way. You know, there's an attachment issue when, especially when we're looking at predictions or what we want to manifest or what we want to see outpictured in our lives, when it's the essence of it. And that's what makes it such a great journey if we can keep curious. And you know, we've gotten to a place too where there's very little nuance allowed, and even in our communication with one another these days. So having that nuance, that the broadness, the welcoming of stories and allowing them to evolve and change. I always say we're stories in motion. You know, I think that that's what's missing. And your story perfectly illustrates what we all need. So let's segue on now into your life. Now, you've been in Hollywood, you worked on Cheers. Fast forward. Now you're at the height of your career, working with people like Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, who's become one of your best friends, with their company Plan B. And I'd love to know, what was the impetus in embarking upon a 3-year journey in researching religious traditions across America for your book, In Search of Grace?
The impetus of that was the love I have for interviewing people, and that I have learned so much by just listening. Honestly, it's the greatest way to learn. And I was able to write a book based on the documentary that I made called Anthem. And then again, opening up my definition of things. I thought I was making a documentary. And then a friend of mine who was an author said, you know, you should really write a book about this experience you've had. Like, these are crazy, amazing experiences, and you're only going to be able to make a 2-hour documentary. I was like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting idea. So I met his book agent, who happened to be Jennifer Rudolph Walsh, who's our mutual friend who sends her love, by the way.
Oh, bit back at her.
Yeah. And that changed my life, because she basically said, well, she said a very specific sentence that changed my life. If you can write, I can sell this as a book. And I said, I don't know if I can write, but I will get back to you. And so my documentary filmmaking partner and I went back to our tiny little apartment in New York City, where I was living at the time. And we wrote some chapters and sent them to Jennifer, and she gave us some notes. We did another pass. And the next thing I knew, we were selling a book. And the next thing I knew, I was writing a book. And was like
can you write?
Life-changing.
It was one of the most beautiful. I got to tell you, I swam into that book. I really did. I mean, it was such a beautiful, Jennifer, obviously, she's the one that connected us. You know, she sent me the book and I just fell in love with you. Like, I was like, who is this person that writes so beautifully? Because you write so lyrically and evocative of the stories that you were presenting, of these people that you met, and made us ask questions. And I think the best stories are metaphors for the best questions. You know, that where we can reflect on ourselves and go, I wonder, what if?
I think, you know, those experiences of just asking questions from people taught me. It was like going back to school and getting a degree in theology, in comparative religion, which was a gift to me. These people I interviewed and spent a lot of time with don't know how they changed my life. I think about them all the time. The Amish farmer I got to interview and actually spend time with, which was, you know, he basically risked his life to do it because he wasn't supposed to talk to me as an outsider. These, you know, nuns and monks who talked to me, people from all kinds of religious walks of life. And they taught me so much. And what I learned from all of them is at the root of all of their practices is a desire, a seeking of oneness. It was so simple. It really boiled down to that, because that was my goal, was to tell the story of each religion in a way that was digestible. It wasn't, you know, the dogma and the sort of, you know, going to school to learn comparative religion. Each one is a story about someone who practices their faith and how they practice it. But what I was really interested in was, what do these practices have in common, if anything, right? We all know they're very distinct in lots of ways, but the root, what is the root of what we're looking for in these different practices? And the answer I got again and again from people, all walks of life, from the Wiccan witches to the Orthodox rabbis, to the Christian, whatever, to the Mormon missionaries, it all kind of boiled down to a very mystical seed, which was we're seeking oneness. And that was really profound to hear in all these different contexts. And it was like I was in on a secret, and I couldn't really tell the people I was interviewing that I was hearing it from everybody else, because they really, for the most part, religions believe that they are the most important. They are the chosen ones. So I couldn't tell them. I just heard that yesterday from a Wiccan witch, but I got to carry that secret forward. And I just want to say also that, and you know this as a writer, I don't feel like I write alone. I really, writing for me is opening up a channel and allowing wisdom that's even greater than mine to come through. And I literally consciously do that before I write, open up the channel and ask for help. And so whatever comes through, if it's a good thing, if people like it, then I can't take all the credit for it, really, is the truth.
So I was actually just going to ask you about where you thought the intersection between creativity and spirituality, where is that? And I think you just described that as the idea of bringing oneness and tuning in and receiving the writing. I know my best writing came when I received it rather than when I was kind of generating it from thought. You know what I mean? It's like recognizing that. And I know that, I've read some of the most extraordinary things that you've written, and they just feel like, wow, where did this come from? It's so good. I want to talk about the stories that you've created that have really impacted me and a lot of people. So you write deeply meaningful stories and you present them in different ways. Either it's books or it's screenwriting or it's, actually producing content. What's your creative process like? Do you ever have a ritual? Like, do you enter into the Wooniverse to actually download all this stuff? Like, is there an actual ritual? Because, I know you said that you get things, like you receive them, but how do you invoke them? That?
Because that's a great question. Important. It's important to understand people's process, right? And because we can try these things ourselves. The toolkit, right, as you like to say. I love that. I mean, meditation is the key. It's the foundational piece, I would say, of my writing. And I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do before I touch an electronic device is I meditate for 20 minutes. And it is the time where I breathe and I clear my head and I talk to my guides. I ask for help. I think it's really important that we ask for what we need from the energy around us, however you want to define it, whether or not, you label it, doesn't matter. But I ask for help. So if I'm writing something, I will literally ask for the help that I need to express, to be an instrument of the divine. And to express in the best possible way and to raise my vibration. I will sit and literally just work to raise my vibration as high as I can and to try and lock that in. What else do I do? I ask, it's almost like housekeeping. I do a moment after I raise my vibration and I kind of get into the right space and ask for help. I then ask to be reminded of all the things that I need to do today. What are my priorities? What are the things that I want to be proactive about versus reacting to other people? Because when you're a producer in particular, you're getting so many emails all day long, so many phone calls, and you can get really swept into other people's needs and agendas. And so I really like to think about, okay, what do I want to do today to be proactive? And amazingly, very specific things like pop into my head. And again, it's not me. It's like something else is going, don't forget to call this person. You should do this for this project. This would be a good idea, and I usually get 2 or 3 and then I write them down and that's my kind of spiritual to-do list for the day.
Oh, I love that. And I love that it is more of a guidance that you're getting and that you ask for help, because I do think the humility piece, and I think it's great to say too, like for me, I know that if I'm asking for help to get what I want, I likely won't get it. Right? So, but if I ask to be a channel,
Yeah.
right, and to be relieved of the bondage of self so that I may better do thy will, right? Let there be light through me, then show me the next move kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then whenever I get stuck, I know I have to go for a walk. Like if I'm in the middle of a writing project, I'm in the zone or I'm not. And if I'm not in the zone, I'm trying to generate it out of my memory or whatever. I need to go out and go for a walk.
Right.
So what do you do when you get blocked?
Well, first of all, the way I got unblocked big picture was I got clear about my mission statement. So I think when I first started writing, I think like everybody, I just wanted to be loved through my writing. I just wanted to be understood. I just wanted somebody to go, oh my God, I read that. I so get you, right? I think that I'm being very, very raw, honest about that. It was more ego. It was more like wounded. My wounded self needed something out of the writing. And I finally saw that and went, whoa, okay, like that's actually what's motivating you. And that's not actually where I want to be coming from. So I really did a lot of soul searching, and I came up with my mission statement. I wrote down what I want to do of service. That was the key. Yep. How do I want to be of service through my writing? And I wrote it down. It's not too long, but it's so specific. And so now I make decisions based on that mission statement. And no matter how much FOMO I might have, if somebody brings me a project and I think, God, that's going to be so fun. I'm so enamored with these people who are doing it. I love them. I want to work with them. If it doesn't fit into my mission statement, I have to say no. And I have stuck to that. I have stuck to that. And it has served me so well. It has taken the ego piece. I don't want to be famous and wealthy from my writing. I really want to help heal people through the projects I work on. And I have to stay true to that North Star. And ever since doing that, the projects that I have worked on have meant so much to me. They've all been incredibly meaningful to me. And I feel like they actually they've touched people. However many people happen to see them, they've touched people. They've awakened them. They've comforted them. They've helped them have conversations that they couldn't have otherwise. And so they've been healing and awakening in different ways. And that's all I want to do. And I'm just trying to stay really, true to that. That's how I stay unstuck, is reminding myself constantly of that North Star. And I also stay unstuck by staying really curious about people and the world. And just, my goal is to not get rigid with time. And that is my, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. I just try to remind myself, don't get rigid, literally just don't do it.
Yeah, don't get stuck in the attachment or the definition, of how this is the way it should be. Even if you've been successful at something, or that you've been in alignment with your mission, and all of a sudden you're onto something new, it's not a cookie cutter of the thing before. I had to learn that too. I love that you brought up the mission, and I love particularly that you talked about that, the humility of saying I wanted to be loved, because I totally did. I hope somebody reads my book, but I didn't even realize that I was coming from the wounded place. Please like me.
Please like me through this book. I know. And it's so,
I'm not like that anymore, but I really know I was.
It's so good that that you can have that realization, having that realization. Look, I'm really big on looking at our shadow. I know you are too.
Me too.
The shadow is if you want to know yourself, study your shadow, study your ego, right? And it's our responsibility, I think, to know our ego, know our shadow, name it, make friends with it. Yeah. And that was part of my shadow. I'm sure for you too. Like a lot of writers, by the way, a lot of storytellers are in trying to heal a wound. That's part of where the need to tell stories comes from, is we're working on our own healing, right? But if I heal, you heal, and vice versa. So it all works out.
No, that's so important too. And also to give ourselves and others, space for their own journey, their own experience, etc. I know that, we bump up against each other's shadow. It's rarely that we're bumping up. We don't say we bump up against the parts that work, right? It's like,
right.
It's
we're not
really
triggered by the good parts.
We're not triggered by the good parts. No, exactly. So I know for me, the past couple of years, I've really focused on doing some deep shadow work around these things. And we are freer and more liberated and more capable of telling the kind of stories, and aligning with the kind of energy that we really genuinely want. And we can add more in the world. And I know that that's, for me, shadow work is everything. It really is. So what else is in your woo-woo toolkit? Do you do,
Let's see, a lot of things. I mean, it's really important that I take care of myself. I take good care of myself, like I do my kids. I have 2 kids. So I've learned I need to, if I don't meditate, I need to work out. I need to have physical activity. I need to sweat. I'm the kind of person that needs that. I have some of my best ideas for everything, my life, my writing, whatever, as I'm running, as I'm working out, as I'm like just letting go physically. So I've learned I need that. I like to cook. I like to spend time with my family and people who know me well. Mm-hmm. I don't feel the need to know a million people. I'm really just, I'm very nourished by the relationships that I have that are close, that are intimate. Those give me such nourishment, and I know you're kind of the same in that way. Yeah, so that
I think that happens with maturity too.
Yeah, for sure.
Where when you don't need to be liked as much too, you end up realizing that these rich conversations that you can have with people that know you well, especially if you're a public person too. I think it's important to have the close connections with people that don't care about that persona at all. It's just like, what did you learn and how can we share about that? And that there's no agendas there.
Right.
I know we got a chance to spend some time together on Zoom during the pandemic, which was really great.
It was the best. And I am the relationships that I love the most, that are really the most nourishing to me are the people who are excited about evolution, who are excited, who believe in it, emotional evolution, who really support each other's evolution.
Yeah.
Those are the things I love the most, those conversations.
I'm really crappy at small talk.
I know you are. And I love it. Every time we talk, we have to dive in.
Let's pull a card. Right? Let's go deep. So I want to take a page out of one of my favorite. Dumplin' really made an impact on me. And I've cried and I laughed and I just thought it was so incredible. So I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to imagine that you are the pageant winner, because that comes right out of Dumplin', at the Miss Wooniverse contest, Miss Wooniverse, and you're giving your acceptance speech. What do you feel is most important for our world right now?
Oh my God. They're supposed to have training for these questions. I think we're here at this moment in time having a paradigm shift in how we are interacting with each other, how the world is reflecting back to us who we are. I think we're in such a cataclysmic moment, and it feels really intense. It feels violent at times. It feels dark. It feels hopeless a lot, particularly if you read headlines all day long. And yet, underneath all of that darkness and chaos, I think is something really profound and beautiful and hopeful, and I believe in it. And that is, there is a larger quiet movement that is about us loving each other and taking care of each other, and making a more conscious choice about how we engage with each other and the world.
I love that you call it a quiet movement. I'm going to jump
Yeah.
into your acceptance speech.
Please, let's do a co-acceptance speech.
Right, a co-acceptance. It feels like that. It feels like it's generative, and it is quiet.
Like a sprout.
And it's in the middle. It's a sprout. And all of the division and all of this, us against you and blah, 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 the cacophony, this is the sprout and the seed that's pushing up through that ground.
Yeah. And I hope, my hope is that all that chaos, all the violence, we don't have to name it. We all know what it is really just the last gasps, the desperate last gasps of masculinity gone awry. And I mean masculinity in women and men.
Yep.
I'm not speaking gender, binary stuff here. It's just a choice of how we each, engage with the world and each other. That's what it is. And there is a femininity to a certain kind of engagement, and there is a kind of, masculinity. Some of the best men I know are, incredibly connected to their femininity. And it's actually something I like to talk about a lot in relation to leadership, because, when I produce on a show, you're dealing with an organism of, something like 150, 200 people. And as a producer, you're really there to set the tone for how we're all going to engage as a microcosm, right?
Sure.
And are we going to lead by fear? Are we going to create kind of chaos, so that in a way to try and make people somehow more productive, more competitive, and we're going to get the best productivity out of people that way, which is really a masculine leadership model? Or are we going to lead with transparency, respect, communication, the ability to listen, active listening? This is a whole different culture, basically, to create in an organism. And so I'm a big believer in this paradigm shift that I think we're having in all different ways.
Somebody wrote one of my favorite books, and actually you and I talked a few years ago about this, that, if you look at that masculine, feminine, let's take those labels off. Well, Riane Eisler wrote a book called The Chalice and the Blade. And the way she described it was she described that moment a few thousand years ago when the partnership model of the goddess culture moved into the dominator model with the advent of weaponry, right? So that we had those 300 years of transition from that, again, partnership, cooperative, collaborative model. The reason why we refer to it as feminine is because the culture, a thousands of years old culture at the time, was matriarchal and matrilineal. And then when we shifted into the patriarchal model, and we have the dominator model, which is what we now refer to as the masculine, but really it is the difference between domination top down, where we have the competitive quality, the produce, boom, boom, boom. No one's really safe, right? There's always,
You're always
let's
on your
compete.
heels. Yeah.
On your heels. Or we're sitting around in a circle and we're talking, there's still a leader. It's not complete democracy, right? But there's a sense of how do we do this together, and how do we honor and actively listen to one another? And that's what you've just described, I think and you do that. And that's why you're teaching that at Indiana University. You're talking about that model.
Kind of less hierarchical too.
Yeah.
Right? Where everyone is contributing something that matters, that is meaningful. So we're part of a purpose. I think that's what motivates us. I do too. Fear is a short-term motivator. It is a short-term motivator, but long-term, we all want to feel like we're contributing to something,
and that we're heard.
Heard.
We feel like there's meaning. Right. And I do think, too, that we're shifting from that acquisitional model mentally to that actualization as well. We really are in this big paradigm shift. So when I say, the actualization versus the acquisition, the acquisitional model, again, is part of that dominator thing where we're going to get, acquire, get more and more and more and do and whatever. And we've all been wounded by that. And then moving into the other one, which we don't totally trust yet, but who am I going to become and what will I experience? So it's really going back as well to what you said earlier in our discussion about creativity and spirituality is about being curious and not being attached to the specifics of it, right? And to experience life as an experience and to have goals and say, okay, this is what we want to create together. We'll hold space for that, the outcome, but how we get there, may not come from those strict, rigid guidelines, which you said about letting go being rigidity, that maybe it's fluid. There's a container, but there's more of a sense that we do it together. And I think that that's true, that everybody wants to feel like they've contributed and that they matter, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not anything to do with the ego. And This was awesome. You know what? Let's pull a card. Let's pull an oracle card.
My favorite cards. I just want.
Which ones are your favorite cards?
I mean, they're all. Come on, the listeners need to know that I am like the Colette card dealer. Like it's the drug of choice for my friends. And when I show up at a dinner party or a gathering or a birthday party, I bring a deck of cards or more than one, and everyone freaks out. And we start pulling cards, and it's just the amount of people. Now I've given so many decks away at this point that there are like 3-4 degrees of separation of like a stranger will now say to me, "Oh, my daughter brought these cards." I'm like, "Wait, is it a Colette deck?" And yes, I swear I'm planting seeds, Colette.
Oh, thank you. So, okay, so I'm going to give you your choice then. I'm going to give you your choice of the Shaman's Dream
I love
Oracle.
it. I have it.
Okay, let's do it. I was going to say, or Wisdom of the Oracle, but you love this one. We'll go this one.
Yeah, let's go Shaman.
Okay, let's do the Shaman's Dream. This was such a great experience for me because I had helped Alberto Villaldo and his wife with his first, but it was more based on Andean shamanism, of which I know nothing about, because they are lineage keepers. But when we decided to do a second deck, I said, listen, the only way I'm going to do this is if it's Jungian, because that's what he and I shared in common, and I could do this with total integrity, that, this is really about the Jungian concept of that of the shamanic journey that we've all been shoved into, like it or not, through the initiation process of going deep into the underworld and all the different layers of experience and coming back with a gift, something that we've earned, and bringing it back to our village or our people, right? So
the Joseph Campbell hero's journey.
Yeah, it's totally that. So this has now become one of my favorite decks to pull from. So here we go. So let's ask the Wooniverse. Mm-hmm. So let's pull a card and see if there's anything else we should be talking about. Groupthink. Ooh, and it's upside down. I love it.
Ooh.
Okay. So I'll start. I
have something to say too about this, but you go first.
So this deck is actually not read reversed, but the fact that it's upside down always tells me the kind of spin I need to talk about it in. And so groupthink is all about how we're conditioned by media, by friends, family, etc., the conditioning of our culture, and how sometimes we lose sight of what we know, we really know is true, that we get caught up in the, the dramas and the, when it bleeds, it leads, like you're saying, headlines, right? And we forget the nuance and we forget all of those things. And we narrow our scope because we want to belong, or we'll buy into this because everybody else is. And we virtue signal and we do all of those things. But this reminds us that at our core, our authenticity is the most important thing, being able to think for ourselves and trusting that the guides, our inner guidance, and the world, the mystical world will show us the way.
Yes, I love that. And what came up for me at that moment when you said it's upside down is comparison. We're in such a deep swirl, right? You could call it a spiral, but let's call it a swirl of comparison. And it's just reinforced every second of our cultural experience, and we have to be so strong. And we're human, obviously we experience it too. people think of me as this big writer, producer person. It doesn't really matter what you've accomplished in life.
No.
You can get caught in the undertow of comparison. And I have to, when you ask like, spiritual practice, what is in your toolkit? That's a big piece of it, right? Because if we can't stay really focused on what it is we are here to do with this one thumbprint that we have, right? This is,
I love that.
we just have one thumbprint, each of us. And I just have to remind myself when I start to go, oh, but look at those shiny toys. And look at what they're creating. I wish I'd thought of that. I wish I had done that. Why can't I do something? When I start to do that, I have to go, whoa, and grab those reins and just get right back to like, I have to trust, like you said, the faith to know. For example, as a storyteller, I'm here to tell the stories I'm here to tell. I'm not here to tell their stories or these others. The stories I'm meant to tell are going to come to me. And I need to have the focus and the energy to bring those to fruition. Right? And so I cannot get caught up in what everyone else is doing and what I'm not involved in and get the FOMO going because, so I'm very careful. I don't do a lot of social media. I stay off stuff like Instagram as much as possible. I'll occasionally dip a toe in to see what a friend is doing, but it really it gets me off track. If I watch too much news, if I read or watch too much news, I'm very conscious of how much headline news I can take in. I want to know what's going on in the world. I want to be engaged. I don't want to live in my own little Wooniverse, but at the same, right? I mean, we need to share the Wooniverse, but
we need to share it. Yeah.
As soon as I start to feel hopeless or just deep in fear or despair, I know it's time to get out of the headlines and reading because it's either getting in to go, how can I be of help here? What can I do about this? Or there's no point in it. We're just swimming in comparison and fear, right? So I think about how what we watch and what we read as important as what we eat, So you can either,
how do you nourish yourself with the stories?
Junk
that you
food
ingest?
is junk food. Mm-hmm.
I have I know people get off on horror stuff, but I will not read anything or watch anything.
I can't either.
That is like demonic or any horrible, disgusting, like lots of violence and stuff. No, that's not going to pollute my mind.
I can't either. Yeah.
So thank you so much. This has been so fantastic.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was awesome. And for everybody listening, Kristen is currently in pre-production with Jennifer Aniston on season 3 of The Morning Show, which I can hardly wait to see. You left us quite a cliffhanger last time. So
we did. Will she live? Will she live or die?
Yes. Will she live? So please look out for that next year on Apple TV. And we also have a link to check out Kristen's book, In Search of Grace, in the show notes. Thank you so much, Kristen. I love you so much. This was such a beautiful conversation.
It was my honor. Thank you.